What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Central District Hoops Report. I'm your host, Justin Griffiths, and we have an exciting week of basketball for you to go over. We had all 8 games of the district, plus the 2 games that had district teams playing Rend Lake go through last week. And we've had some teams that have played to where I thought they were going to be around this time of the year. And we've had some surprise teams as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first of 8 games that affected district standings. And that is Kaskaskia versus Wabash Valley. Like I said, starting with Wabash Valley versus Kaskaskia. Kaskaskia pulls up what I would call one of the upsets of the early season and wins this game 78-65. It was a 36-33 game at the break before Kaskaskia breaks away and outscores the Warriors 42-32 in the second half. Unfortunately, as we jump into the stats here, Wabash doesn't have any stats in, and so we'll go through those possibly later on. But for the Blue Devils of Kaskaskia, on their home floor, Alan Myers led the way with 7 of 12 shooting from the field, 18 of 20 from the foul line, for a grand total of 32 points. Jared Mackey also was 5 of 11 from the field and had 14 points with 4 rebounds. Alan Myers also had 11 rebounds to go along with all of that. And finally, Miles Liddell was another Kaskaskia Blue Devil in double figures with 10 points off of a 4 of 7 shooting performance, grabbing 4 offensive rebounds and 3 steals. Off the bench, it was only Kendall Van Dyke who had 4 points off of a 1 of 4 shooting and 2 of 2 from the foul line, grabbing 2 rebounds as well. So again, just nothing to go off of for Wabash. For Kaskaskia, Alan Myers was a one-man wrecking crew, and Kaskaskia opened up district play 1-0, defeating the Wabash Valley Warriors. And the next game is the Lakeland Lakers against the Lincoln Trail Statesmen, and this was one of the toss-up games that I said was going to be very interesting to watch between these two teams. It was Lincoln Trail leading at the break 39-34 before pulling out an 83-73 victory over the Lakers. It was in Robinson, so I always think that the home team between these two teams has the advantage. Let's go ahead and look at the stats here. First team stats, Lakeland was 30 of 55, while Lincoln Trail was 29 of 54. So both teams shot over 50% from the field. Lincoln Trail was 8 of 21 from behind the arc, while Lakeland was 7 of 20. Like I said, very comparable. It was the free throw disparity here, where Lakeland was only 6 of 14 compared to 17 of 20 that led the way for the Statesmen to pull out the 10-point victory. For the Lakers, they were led in scoring starter-wise by Locke Offerman, who was 8 of 10 shooting from the field, having 17 points before fouling out in the game. He also grabbed 4 rebounds. He was the only Laker in double figures. The only other person who was close was Peyton Baird, who was 3 of 7 from the field, grabbing 4 rebounds and 8 points. Off the bench, it was Lavelle Tinsley, who was 8 of 13 from the field for the Lakers, including 5 of 8 from behind the arc, while Keenan Gray was 8 of 10 from the field and finished with 16 points. For Lincoln Trail, they were led by Mike White, who was 9 of 15 from the field, 3 of 7 from behind the arc, had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals to go along with 28 points. Also, Jay Chillis was 4 of 10 from the field, 1 of 6 from behind the arc, having 10 assists to go along with his 11 points. And Jared Jackson rounding out the leading scorers for Coach Cotton with a 4 of 7 shooting performance, grabbing 7 rebounds and finishing with 15 points. Off the bench, it was Michael Stover with a perfect 6 for 6 from the field, finishing with 12 points. Lincoln Trail, I said it was going to be a toss-up between these two teams, and Lincoln Trail picks up the first win in their district standings as well. Next up, you have the Vincennes University traveling to Logan to take on the John A. Logan Volunteers. And this one, I said it in the preview, this was going to be the game of the week, and it turned out to be the game of the week, as it was 40-37 at the break in favor of the Trailblazers. And then Vincennes extended the lead to 10 a couple different times, but it never got any more than that because Logan was able to cut it back down to single digits, and within a couple possessions, Vincennes pulls out the 87-80 victory here. And again, I said it was going to be a good one. This matchup is always good between these two teams because they are equally coached well. And for Vincennes, looking at the stats, they were led by Dre Vassar, who was 11 of 21 shooting from the field. He was 0 of 5 from behind the arc, but he did have 8 assists as well. He finished with 27 points. Dayton Williams was 8 of 14 from the field, 3 of 3 from behind the arc, and had 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. He finished with 24 points. That on top of battling foul problems with 4 fouls. And finally, the last Trailblazer in double figures was Lorenzo Malagnini, who was 9 of 10 shooting from the field, having 6 defensive rebounds out of his 9, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, finishing with 19 points for Coach Franklin. There was nobody off the bench that scored more than 2, and those 2 were Prince Ejugwu and Javon Guess, both with 2 points. And Prince did foul out in this ballgame. For Coach Smith-Peters' John A. Logan team, they were led by Marcus Eves, who was 8 of 11 from the field, had 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, and had 22 points. Darkel Payne was the only other volunteer in double figures with a 6 of 10 shooting performance with 18 points starter-wise. The only other starter for Coach Smith-Peters in double figures. Off the bench, Cameron McDaniels was 7 of 12 shooting from the field, 4 of 6 from the foul line, having 4 rebounds and 19 points as well. And again, I said this was going to be an interesting game between the two clubs. It always is, especially for the opening game between the two. And Vincennes maintains unbeaten as they picked up a huge road win against Logan. Final game that affected district standings was Southwestern Illinois College traveling to Shawnee to take on the Saints, and the Saints picked up a huge win of 82-70. They led 40-27 at the break, and then played pretty much even in the second half, 42-43 in favor of Swick. However, like I said, not enough to overcome that big first half deficit for the Blue Storm. Looking at this, they were led by Giulio Rigato, who was 7 of 12 shooting from the field, having 10 rebounds as well, finishing with 16 points. And then Matthew Kupruelzi, who was 4 of 9 shooting from the field, having 8 rebounds and finishing with 12 points. Those 2 were the only 2 in double figures, both starters and off the bench. However, you also had key contributors by John Brigham, who had 8 points off the bench. Dustin Collins had 8 points off the bench. And Jerome Weisinger, who was perfect from the field and finished with 7 points. For Shawnee, they were led starter-wise by Allen King Jr., who was 4 of 7 from the field and having 6 rebounds. James Deloche, who was 6 of 10 shooting from the field, finishing with 12 points as well. But they were led by all-time scoring by Derek Shepard, coming off the bench, 4 of 10 shooting from the field, 3 of 7 from behind the arc, but it was his contribution from the free throw line at 10 for 11 that led the way for the Saints. He finished with 21 points, 5 assists, and 2 rebounds. Zion Green also had a huge night. He was 6 of 11 from the field and had 15 points and had 6 assists as well. And again, Shawnee, it was the biggest that they had to come out strong, and they were able to do so. So they picked up a huge win and moved into 1-0 heading into Saturday, along with Vincennes, Lincoln Trail, and Kaskaskia. So it was very interesting to see on Wednesday night who picked up their first district win of the year. And then the only non-district game but a conference game for these two teams was Olney Central and Rend Lake. And it was a surprising performance by the Blue Knights as they jumped all over the Warriors 45-29 in the first half. But Rend Lake wasn't going to go quietly, and they mounted an incredible comeback and almost winning the ballgame, just falling a little bit short. But they won the second half 48-39 for the final score of Olney 84, Rend Lake 77. And again, for a new coaching staff picking up a huge conference win, even though it's not district wins, means that they're starting to build this culture. Let's look at this very quickly and focus solely on the Olney Central Blue Knights. Jaden Eldridge was 8 of 13 from the field, 4 of 7 from behind the arc, grabbing 6 rebounds, finishing with 26 points, as he was 1 of 4 starters in double figures for Olney. Kasim Nash was 4 of 9 shooting from the field, perfect from the foul stripe, having 5 assists as well, finishing with 18 points. And then you got Jordan Babcock and Gabe Johnson finishing with 11 points apiece. Babcock was 4 of 10 from the field and having 9 rebounds to go along with 2 assists. While Gabe Johnson was 5 of 7 from the field and having 4 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks to go along with it as well. And again, just a great conference win for Olney, even though it doesn't add up into a district win necessarily. Moving on to Saturday, let's go ahead and stick with the Blue Knights of Olney Central as they traveled to take on the Lakers of Lakeland. Olney coming off that huge win against Rend Lake, like I said, while Lakeland was coming off of a loss against Lincoln Trail, so both teams having something to play for. Olney, this is your district opener. How do you fare? Well, you fared okay looking in the stats in the first half. It was 34-29 at the break. However, I think the wheels came off a little bit for the Blue Knights as Lakeland was able to have a huge second half, winning that one 47-26 for an 81-55 win overall. For the Blue Knights, they were led by Gabe Johnson, who was 5 of 12 shooting from the field, grabbing 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and having 16 points. Jaden Eldridge was 5 of 10 shooting from the field, 4 of 8 of that was from behind the arc. He had 6 rebounds, 2 assists, and 1 steal, finishing with 14 points. And those were the only 2 players in double figures for the Blue Knights. And for Lakeland, unfortunately, I have no stats to go off of. But once again, Lakeland able to bounce back after their loss against Lincoln Trail to even up their district standings to 1-1 on the year. Again, first week, there's going to be a lot of moving and shaking going on. And Olney is the one of the teams that it comes into the second week at 0-1. Moving on to Wabash Valley versus John A. Logan on Saturday, and I thought this was going to be a closer game than it was. Logan was able to bounce back off of their loss to Vincennes with a 70-58 victory over the host Wabash Valley Warriors. And again, it was a huge first half for Logan, 41 points in the half that led them to victory. Let's go ahead and look at the team stats individually, starting with Logan, who was 4 of 6. Was his leading scorer. Christian Dorr, he was 7 of 9 from the foul line, 10 assists as well. He finished with 16 points. The only other volunteer in double figures starter-wise was Marcus Eves, who was 3 of 9 from the field, had 7 rebounds and 2 assists to go along with 10 points. Off the bench for Coach Smith Peters, it was Taylor Smith, who was 4 of 7 from the field and grabbing 10 points. He also had 5 rebounds to go along with that. For Wabash Valley, we have no stats, unfortunately. But once again, Wabash Valley, I thought this was going to be a closer game than it turned out to be. John A. Logan played like I thought John A. Logan was going to play after a tough loss to Vincennes. And I just thought Wabash was going to come back and battle them a little bit closer. I thought this was going to go into overtime. Unfortunately, Logan pulled a 41-point first half and held Wabash to 28. Now, in the second half, it was 30-29 in favor of the Warriors, but once again, just not enough to overcome John A. Logan. Then you had a pair of 1-0 teams battling off one against one another here between Vincennes and Lincoln Trail. And in the first half, it was a very good game, even with the snow coming in between Illinois and Indiana. At the time, Vincennes picked up a huge win here, 77-59, off of a huge second half, not necessarily a huge first half. First half, Vincennes led by 5 at 42-37. But like I said, it was a 35-22 second half that led the way for the Trailblazers. Looking at the stats, Lincoln Trail was led by Mike White, who was 8 of 20 from the field, having 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and 23 points. Also, Jared Jackson was another statesman in double figures, 5 of 8 shooting from the field, and 17 points. He had 4 rebounds, 2 offensive, 2 defensive, and a steal to go along with that as well. And then the only person off the bench that made any considerable contribution was Asher Evans, who was 3 of 4 shooting from the field, adding 7 points there. And like I said, for Vincennes, it was a huge second half. They had 2 players in double figures. Jalen Calloway, who was 6 of 10 shooting from the field with 16 points, 2 of 4 from behind the arc, had 7 rebounds, 3 assists to go along with those 16 points. They were led by Dayton Williams, who was 7 of 14 from the field, had 11 rebounds, 5 assists, and finished with 17 points. And Dre Vassar, another Trailblazer starter in double figures, with 11 points off of a 4 of 12 shooting performance, and leading the team in assists with 7 as well. Off the bench, only one Trailblazer in double figures. It was Deron Guess, who was 6 of 11 shooting from the field and finished with 13 points. Again, VU picks up a huge win at home, finishing their first half of the season unbeaten and the number 1 team in the country. Also, they finished the first week of district play unbeaten and are 2-0 in district play. And the final district game of the day's Saturday was Kaskaskia versus Swick. And once again, it was a close first half. Kaskaskia trailed by 4 at 32-28. And Swick was able to build off of that and pull out a 79-70 victory for the Blue Storm. So Vincennes, the only unbeaten team heading into the second week of district play. Let's go ahead and look at Saturday's stats between the Blue Devils and the Blue Storm. For Kaskaskia, they were led in scoring by Alan Myers, who was 8 of 10 shooting. Once again, he had 9 rebounds, 7 of them being on the defensive end of things. Before fouling out, he finished with 24 points. But he led 4 Blue Devils in scoring with double figures. The other Blue Devil was Miles Liddell, 4 of 11 shooting from the field, but he was 5 of 7 from the foul line, having 4 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block to go along with 13 points. And then Keaton Grant Miller and Antoine Tillman finished with 12 points. Tillman did it from the free throw line mostly. 10 of 12 there for him to go along with 3 assists, 6 rebounds, and 3 steals. While Garrett Miller was 5 of 10 shooting from the field, finishing with 12 points as well. For the Blue Storm, they were led with only 1 starter in double figures. That was Weisinger here, who was 4 of 9 shooting from the field, 4 rebounds with 11 points. It was a couple players off the bench for Coach Harrington. Matthew Cooper-Elzy was 6 of 9 shooting from the field, 8 of 10 from the foul line, having 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and only 2 turnovers. He finished with 20 points. And also Nick Horace, first time we said his name this video, finishing with 20 points off of a 7 of 15 shooting performance. 5 of 9 from behind the arc. He finished with 6 rebounds, 4 steals as well for Coach Harrington's Blue Storm. Those two led the way for Swick to pull out a huge victory and for them to be tied with Kaskaskia heading into the second week. Both teams at 1-1 in district standings. And again, non-district game, but a conference game for these two teams featured Rend Lake versus Shawnee. And Shawnee falls in this one. It took double overtime to do it, however, 99-96 in favor of the home team Warriors. Let's go ahead and look at how Shawnee fared here. They were led by James DeLosh, who was 8 of 17 shooting from the field, 6 of 8 from the foul line. Had 10 rebounds and finished with 22 points. Also, Tyree Jackson had double digits in the rebounding department with 13 of them. 6 of 11 shooting from the field, 5 of 7 from the foul line. He finished with 17 points. Alan King as well was in double figures with 19 off of a 7 of 14 shooting performance, grabbing 6 rebounds, an assist, and 2 steals to go along with it. However, he did foul out at some point in that game. Finally, you had Derek Shepard for the Saints as a starter in double figures. He finished with 10, 3 of 12 shooting from the field, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, leading the way for them, and 1 steal. Off the bench, it was Zayden Green, who was 4 of 6 from the field, 4 of 4 from the foul line, finishing with 3 assists, 2 rebounds, and 15 points. Once again, does not affect Shawnee in district play, but it does affect them in conference play for what that is. Once again, an interesting matchup between Rend Lake and Shawnee, and it's another Division I opponent that the Warriors were able to knock off. And again, looking at the standings after 1 week, you have Shawnee and Alney, the two teams that have only played 1 district game. With that being said, let's look at the standings. Vincennes leads the way at 2-0, followed by the aforementioned Saints at 1-0. Then you have Lincoln Trail, Kaskaskia, Lakeland, Swick, and Logan all at 1-1. Before you have Alney at 0-1 and Wabash Valley at 0-2. Now, Dave Hunter does have the 1-1s separated by the overall record, so then it would be Kaskaskia, followed by Lincoln Trail and Swick, and so on and so forth. I just throw them all up there as 1-1. We'll figure out the tiebreakers later because it is way too early to deal with tiebreakers, but that is going to be the district first week of schedules, and for a lot of these teams, that means their first half of the season has come to a close, and it will be interesting to see how that goes going forward. Like I said, finals week this week for a lot of these teams, so not a lot of competition going on, so I will be taking the next couple weeks off before we head back into the new year, where a lot of these guys will start back up right after New Year's Day. So that's going to do it for this episode. Like I said, a lot going on in the district. We had our first 8 games being played, and we've seen some parity minus the top overall team in Vincennes. They are the number 1 team in the country, so that was kind of to be expected, but to see, Kaskaskia pull off an opening game win for them was interesting to see, as well as having teams like Wabash Valley finishing 0-2 in district play early on is interesting. But like I said, it's a long season. We'll pick this back up in January. For those of you watching this the day it comes out, I hope you have a great Christmas and great holiday break. Overall, I will see you all back in 2026. Until then, peace.